It starts with the faintest noise, a rustle in the still desert night, too subtle to be a breeze. The camera feed flickers. But the empty desert stretches for miles on all sides of the facility. The security monitors display nothing. Nothing at all. Just a clean, uninterrupted screen of sand and harsh artificial light. Then, the whispers. Soft, too soft to be real. They ebb and flow like a strange wind, brushing against the edges of your hearing. So faint it's almost imagined. But it's not. It's coming from the direction of the East Wing, a place you're certain is supposed to be empty at this hour. You flip through the security footage. No movement, nothing, then there. A figure, caught in the corner of one frame. It's only visible for a split second, but you know what you saw. The image of a figure, face pale and eyes hollow, like a ghost trapped in a place it doesn't belong. You freeze. The whispering stops. And then the screen goes black. The alarms never sound. The desert stretched in every direction, a barren wasteland of cracked earth and endless sky. Nothing moved out there. Nothing ever did. Tom adjusted the security camera feed, his eyes flicking across the grid of empty hallways and rooms. It was quiet, unnervingly so. The humming of the facility's air conditioning system was the only sound that broke the stillness. Out here in the middle of nowhere, there was nothing to disturb the peace. No people, no traffic, no reason to check the cameras unless something broke the monotony. And it never did. Except tonight. He glanced at the clock on the wall. The hour hand dragged, creeping toward the end of his shift. His eyes were dry from staring at the screens too long, his mind sluggish from the relentless silence. Another half hour, then he'd get the hell out of here. A hot meal, a warm bed, some normalcy. But just as he settled back into his chair, a soft thud echoed from the maintenance corridor. It was faint, almost drowned out by the steady hum of the ventilation. He paused, listening. Just the wind, he thought. But there was no breeze tonight, the air too still to carry any sounds from outside. He flicked the security camera joystick, checking the hallway view. Static. Nothing on the screen. He cursed under his breath and tapped the monitor to wake it. Nothing. Probably a malfunction, he told himself, a wave of irritation rising in his chest. He was used to this, old equipment, old building. But still, the odd, unexplained sound gnawed at him. The hallway remained empty, just the cold blue light casting long shadows across the walls. Nothing moved. But the thud had sounded too deliberate, too calculated to be an accident. Tom stood up, stretching his stiff legs. The cameras might be useless, but the halls weren't. He grabbed the flashlight from his desk drawer and stepped into the corridor, the light flickering faintly against the pale walls. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed low, their light buzzing, flickering. He walked down the hall slowly, his boots thudding softly against the cracked tiles. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder as he moved further from the security room. He passed the doors to the maintenance closets and storage rooms. Each one locked. Each one empty. The thud, whatever it had been, wasn't coming from here. He turned the corner, the corridor stretching ahead, empty and silent. Then the whisper started. It was barely perceptible, just a fleeting sound, like breath on glass. He froze mid-step. Tom. His name, thin and breathy, coming from somewhere in the darkness ahead. The flashlight shook in his hand as he swung it toward the sound, heart hammering in his chest. The beam of light sliced through the gloom, illuminating nothing but empty walls and doors. His breath quickened. Just the wind, he muttered, his voice too loud in the stillness. But the words felt hollow. He knew it wasn't the wind. The voice, his name again, came from somewhere deeper in the building. The East Wing. That section of the facility was never used. No one ever went in there. Ever. Tom's throat tightened. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the flashlight switch. This isn't right. He glanced back at the security room, barely visible down the corridor. The thought of running back to his station and locking the door crossed his mind, but something was pulling him forward. Something he couldn't explain. The whisper came again, now louder, almost pleading. Tom. It was clearer this time, more insistent. It sent a chill down his spine. He wasn't imagining this. This was real. Without thinking, he took a step toward the east wing, his flashlight flicking erratically across the walls as he moved. Every step felt like it echoed, louder than the last, amplifying the silence around him. The hum of the lights grew louder too, as though the building was alive, aware of his every move. The east wing doors were just ahead. He hadn't planned on this, hadn't planned on going this far, but his feet carried him closer, almost against his will. Each footfall felt heavy, as if the very floor beneath him was thickening, resisting him. Then the flashlight flickered. Tom cursed, shaking it in frustration. When it steadied, the hallway before him was different. He didn't know why or how, but the walls seemed to stretch and bend in a way they hadn't a moment ago. The faintest outline of something wrong. A cold sweat prickled at the back of his neck as the air turned sharp. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He swung the beam of light down the hallway. Nothing. The whisper stopped. The door to the east wing stood ajar, a sliver of darkness between the frame. And then a figure. It was quick. Too quick for Tom to fully process. A flash of something. No, someone, a person standing just within the doorway. Its face was obscured by shadow, but the shape was unmistakable. Tom's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he stood frozen. Flashlight trained on the figure. Then it was gone. The hallway was empty again. No person, no sound. The air was thick with an oppressive silence. Tom's hand shook as he gripped the flashlight, his breath coming in shallow, frantic gasps. He stepped forward cautiously, his heart slamming in his chest. No. This wasn't happening. He forced himself to the east wing door, the weight of the moment settling heavily on him. There was something, someone inside. And whatever it was, it had seen him. The door creaked open, slow, dragging on the hinges. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. He stepped inside. Tom wasn't sure what he'd expected when he walked into the east wing. Whatever it was, it wasn't this. The air inside felt wrong, thick and cold, like it had been holding its breath. There was no wind, no sound of distant machines or the hum of the facility's lights. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses down on you, makes your skin feel tight, as if the world has paused to stare at you. The flashlight flickered as he moved deeper into the hallway. His feet scraped across the floor, each step a reminder of how alone he was. And yet, there was a presence here. Something was watching him, something he couldn't name. He tried to tell himself it was the old building. Creaks in the walls, a few things out of place. But that didn't explain the strange feeling in his stomach, that gnawing sensation that something wasn't right. The walls were covered in peeling paint, the floors worn by years of neglect. But it was the smell that unsettled him most. Damp, musty, like a place that had been abandoned for far longer than it should have been. A door opened ahead of him. Not with a creak or a push, just a slow, quiet slide open, like it had always been waiting. The beam of the flashlight caught the edge of the doorframe, the wood jagged and chipped. He didn't know why he kept moving. Curiosity, fear, or something else, something buried deep inside him, urging him forward. The voice from earlier still echoed in his mind, but it had faded now, like it was never real to begin with. But as he entered the room, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. The room was small, just a janitor's closet if he had to guess, but everything inside it seemed off. The cleaning supplies were old, forgotten, some of the labels smeared and illegible. The floor was covered in a layer of dust that had settled years ago. And yet, it looked too perfect, as if it had been left undisturbed, untouched. Something scratched the back of his mind, a cold shiver that ran up his spine. The flashlight swept over the cluttered shelves, the flickering light catching something on the wall. It was a picture, a photograph that had been pinned there with a rusty tack. He stepped closer, squinting at the yellowed edges of the image. A group of people stood in front of the facility, their faces obscured by shadows. They looked like workers. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the photo, except for one thing. One person stood apart from the others, their face blurred and distorted, as though it was being wiped out by some invisible hand. The figure was just wrong, too vague, too distorted to make sense of. A shiver ran down Tom's spine. He ripped his eyes away from the photo and turned toward the door. But before he could leave, the air shifted. The temperature dropped, just a degree, just enough to make his breath visible. The hairs on his neck stood on end. He turned back toward the closet, the flashlight wavering in his hand. That's when he heard it, a faint scraping sound like something dragging across the floor. He spun around. Nothing. The room stood silent again. Too silent. He was losing it. Just tired, that's all. Too many hours spent in the dark. Too much isolation. But then a figure appeared at the far end of the room. It wasn't a person, not entirely. It was a shadow at first, a shape that flickered and bent unnaturally, growing longer, thicker. And then it solidified into something horrible. A face twisted and hollow, pale with eyes that seemed to suck the light from the room. Its mouth opened, but there was no sound, only a gaping blackness that seemed to reach out toward him. Tom's heart stopped. His legs were frozen. His eyes locked on the figure, and for a moment, he thought he was imagining it. But no, it was there. It was real. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have stayed." The words were barely more than a whisper, but they crawled into his skin, slid under his bones. He stumbled backward, his flashlight dropping to the ground with a clatter. He didn't dare take his eyes off the thing. It was like a nightmare, something he couldn't wake up from. The figure didn't move, not at first. It simply watched him. And that was worse than anything. Worse than the dark eyes, worse than the stillness. The waiting. Finally, Tom broke free from his paralysis and ran, bolting down the hall toward the exit. His pulse was a drumbeat in his ears, his mind spiraling. He didn't stop until he was back in the security room. The door slammed shut behind him. He leaned against the desk, breathing heavily, trying to steady himself. It wasn't real, he told himself. It couldn't have been. But the moment he glanced at the security cameras, his stomach lurched. There, on one of the monitors, he saw it again. The figure standing in the very corner of the east wing, its face still blurred, its form more distinct now. He didn't know how it had gotten there. The feed should have been dead. It had been dead. And yet, there it was. Something shifted in his gut. Something primal. His fingers hovered over the controls. Heart racing. He had to leave. He had to get out of here right now. But the fear held him in place. He tried to turn off the camera, but the button didn't work. No matter what he pressed, the figure remained on screen, staring at him. "Help me." The voice came again. This time it wasn't distant. It was close, as though it were coming from behind him. Tom whipped around, panic crawling up his throat. The room was empty. Of course it was empty. But the air had thickened, something pressing in on him. He could feel it, it was here. A cold breath tickled the back of his neck. There's something wrong with this place. The thought settled into his mind. Quiet but undeniable. The whispers from the cameras, the strange figure, the sense of being watched. And the photograph. Those people. Why had their faces been blurred? Why had it been left there, as if someone wanted him to find it? The answers, if they existed, were buried deep in the facility, somewhere he hadn't yet dared to go. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the building, something was waiting for him. It wasn't just a ghost or a hallucination. It was something worse, something alive. He could feel it closing in. The air inside the facility had become oppressive, thick with an energy that made Tom's skin crawl. The hum of the ventilation was louder now, distorted, like it was struggling to breathe. Every corner of the building felt like it was closing in on him, and the walls seemed to pulse with a quiet, menacing rhythm. He couldn't escape it. The thing that had been watching him, whispering to him, was getting closer. The feeling in his gut was undeniable now. Whatever this was, whatever he had stumbled into, it was no longer content with being a shadow in the dark. It was hunting him. His fingers trembled as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The security room was no refuge. It had become a cage. The monitors flickered, cutting in and out, showing nothing but static, except for one screen. That one screen remained steady, showing the hallway just outside his door. empty save for the faintest shifting shadow in the distance. It moved, but only when he wasn't looking directly at it. Tom swallowed hard, his pulse hammering in his throat. It was getting worse, it was getting closer. His thoughts scrambled, and a panic so fierce it left his limbs weak gripped him. He was alone. Alone in a building that had become an alien thing. No one knew what had been happening. No one would believe him. Hell, he barely believed it himself. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to run out into the desert where he could breathe again. But he couldn't. There was something in the building that wouldn't let him go. It wasn't just the ghosts, the strange whispers, the shifting shadows. It was more than that. Something worse. Something that had been here long before him, and would be long after he was gone. The door to the security room creaked, faint but undeniable, like a whisper in the quiet. Tom's heart seized. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes flicked to the monitor, the only thing that felt even remotely safe. The screen displayed a figure standing just outside the door. It was human, or at least it looked human. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, the body too thin. The head, elongated. And the face, it was a blur, an impossibility. The features warped and shifted, like it was fighting to retain some semblance of a human shape, but never quite succeeding. Tom wanted to scream, but the terror lodged in his throat, blocking his voice. His hand reached for the panic button, but the seconds stretched into eternity as he stared at the screen. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, a dark presence, towering over the hallway, looking in at him. Then it tilted its head. The motion was slow, deliberate, like a predator savoring the moment before striking. And then it smiled. A smile that wasn't human. It was a grotesque, twisted mockery. A wide, rictus grin with no expression behind it. And the thing spoke, its voice jagged, distorting, like 1,000 voices layered on top of each other. You shouldn't have stayed, Tom. You shouldn't have looked. You're ours now. The voice reverberated through the room, like it was coming from everywhere. From the walls, from the floor, from inside his head. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out. The sudden darkness hit like a blow to the chest. Tom's pulse pounded in his ears as he scrambled to turn on the flashlight, but his hands were shaking too violently. The light flared weakly, casting a thin beam over the room. And in that flickering light, he saw something moving across the floor. Something black, something wrong. The thing, the figure, had entered the room. It was there in the darkness, moving too quickly for him to track, its distorted form rushing forward, and then, the cold, the feeling of ice pressing against his skin, crawling under his flesh, sinking into his bones. Tom stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His body was shaking, but it wasn't from the cold. No, it was worse than that. This was fear, pure and unadulterated. The kind that claws at your insides and makes you wish you were anywhere but here. The walls seemed to close in on him, the ceiling dropping, the floor rising. His thoughts broke apart, scattering into fragments. He was trapped. He knew it now, knew that there was no way out. Whatever had been stalking him, it was here. Here. It was too late. A whisper in the dark, too close, too real, made his stomach turn. Don't fight it, Tom. You've already seen us. You're ours. He turned, throwing himself toward the door, but it was too late. The air around him turned thick, like tar, wrapping itself around his limbs, pulling him down. He struggled, gasping for breath, his hands clawing at the walls. No. No. Bang! The door slammed shut in front of him, trapping him inside. His heart stopped. His breath froze. The air was thick with dread, the sound of whispers becoming an unbearable roar in his ears. He couldn't escape. He couldn't breathe. The temperature dropped again, colder now, until his teeth chattered uncontrollably. He tried to scream, but his voice was lost in the thickening air. The walls closed in further, the lights flickering, shadows dancing on the edges of his vision. He heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in the empty hallway outside. The thing was coming. Tom turned around, his back pressed against the door, his body frozen in place. There was no escape now. The whispers grew louder, swirling in the corners of his mind, mixing with the sound of his own panicked breath. The door behind him shuddered, rattling on its hinges, like something was pushing against it from the other side. His legs buckled. He collapsed to the ground, eyes wide with terror, but there was nowhere to go. The figure from the screen was already in the room, standing in front of him now, its shape shifting, contorting like it was made of shadows and broken bones. Its smile widened, impossibly wide, stretching past what was human. "We've been waiting, Tom. You've seen too much." And then it opened its mouth. But this wasn't a mouth. It was a gaping hole, a void that seemed to suck everything into it. Tom didn't scream. He couldn't. Everything went dark. The facility had gone quiet again. Tom's heart beat in time with the empty hum of the ventilation system. It was a sound he'd grown used to, the background noise of isolation. But now, as his eyes flickered open to the dim, flickering light of the security room, it wasn't the same. The air felt thicker, the silence more oppressive. The building seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. He wasn't sure how long it had been since the darkness had taken him. Seconds, hours, days. Time had lost its meaning the moment he stepped into this hellhole. The same weight hung in the air, but now it was heavier, more suffocating. He could feel it in his bones. It had changed him, whatever it was. And it wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Tom sat up slowly, his body aching, his mind sluggish, like wading through water. His hands, still trembling, brushed against his shirt, the cold, damp fabric clinging to his skin. He reached for his face, finding his skin chilled to the touch. His fingers shook as they traced the hollow lines of his features. He hadn't been crying. There was no moisture left in him. But he felt something shift, something other inside of him. Like a weight settling in his chest, heavy and cold. The room felt wrong. The air too still. It didn't feel like the security room anymore. It felt like a tomb. He stood up, his legs unsteady, and moved toward the monitors. They flickered on, one by one, revealing empty hallways. The camera feeds, once erratic, now ran clear. But the silence was louder than it had ever been before. The building stretched out before him, each screen showing the same desolate emptiness. Long corridors, rusted doors, shadowed corners. But there were no figures. No twisted, smiling faces. No whispers. Nothing. Tom's breath hitched in his throat. He grabbed the monitor controls, flipping through the cameras. They all showed the same thing. The same empty, lifeless halls. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. He was alone. But the presence was still there. He could feel it. He could hear it in the back of his mind. A buzzing hum of something that wasn't quite right. Something that had been with him since he stepped foot in this place. A sickness that had wormed its way into his soul. He blinked, staring at the camera feed again. There it was, the reflection, a dark shape standing just behind him in the glass. A figure, impossibly tall, its limbs stretching unnaturally, its body a distortion of shadows. Tom didn't move. He couldn't. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body betrayed him, frozen in place. The thing wasn't there. He knew that. It wasn't standing behind him, not physically. But it was here in the reflection in the monitors in his mind. The whispers came again, but they weren't the soft, distant murmurs from before. They were clearer now, insistent. You shouldn't have stayed. Tom's blood ran cold. His body began to tremble again, his legs giving way beneath him. He sank to the floor, his breath shallow as the whispers filled the air around him. It was too much. His mind couldn't handle it anymore. His sanity was slipping through his fingers like water. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers stopped. The room went quiet again. The hum of the ventilation system, the flicker of the lights, it was all that remained. The silence was crushing. But in that silence, Tom heard something else. A click. A sound that didn't belong. The soft, metallic click of a door opening. He froze. Slowly, cautiously, he turned his head toward the hallway. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat loud enough to drown out the silence. But when he looked toward the door to the security room, nothing. The hallway was empty. For a brief moment, a sliver of hope flickered in Tom's chest. Maybe it was over. Maybe the thing that had haunted him, stalked him, was gone. Maybe it had moved on, tired of its game. But as quickly as that hope had come, it died, crushed by the weight of the reality he faced. The facility wasn't empty. Not anymore. Tom got to his feet, his legs unsteady, but he couldn't just sit there. The truth had begun to settle on him, and there was no avoiding it. The building was alive in a way he couldn't explain. It had always been alive, and it had never wanted him to leave. He stumbled to the door, his hand gripping the cold handle. The weight of the air in the room pressed against his chest, suffocating. He didn't know what would be waiting on the other side, but he couldn't stay here any longer. The walls had closed in too tightly. With a deep breath, he opened the door. The hallway outside was dim, the same cold, unfeeling light casting long shadows. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he walked down the hall, his mind screaming at him to turn back. But he couldn't. He had to know. He had to find the truth, even if it destroyed him. The whispers were gone now. The presence, too, seemed to have faded. But there was something off in the air, something he couldn't place. His footsteps faltered as he reached the end of the hall. He turned the corner, and there it was. The East Wing. The door to the East Wing was open. It wasn't supposed to be. The East Wing had always been locked, unused, off-limits. He had never been inside before. But now the door stood wide, like an invitation. Or a warning. Tom stepped closer. His heart raced in his chest, each beat louder than the last. The air seemed to thicken, and the temperature dropped again. He couldn't tell if it was the building or if it was him, but the cold seemed to seep into his bones, gnawing at him. He took a step inside. The hallway was even darker here. The lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting harsh shadows that seemed to shift and distort as he moved deeper into the wing. The walls were covered in a layer of grime, and the floor felt uneven beneath his feet. He knew this place. This was the heart of the facility, the place where the building's secrets had been buried. And now it was waking up. His footsteps echoed louder, each one reverberating through the empty halls. He could feel something pulling him forward, urging him deeper into the darkness. And as he walked, a realization began to dawn on him. He wasn't alone. The shadows stretched around him, twisting, warping, as if they were alive. The temperature dropped even further, and he could see his breath in the air, misting before him. He could hear something behind him now, the faintest sound of movement. A shuffle. A dragging step. The whispers were back. You shouldn't have stayed. This time they weren't distant. They were here. Right behind him. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. He could feel it, though. Something moving, closing in on him. Its presence pressing on him like an unrelenting weight. His heart pounded in his chest, his breath quickening. He could almost hear the thing's voice in his head, its whispers like claws digging into his thoughts. It's too late. His body shook, but he couldn't stop. He had to keep moving. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He was already too far gone. A door at the end of the hall opened, and Tom stepped through it, knowing full well what he would find. The room was dark, so dark that even his flashlight seemed to vanish into it. The walls were covered in images, photographs from years past, faces twisted and erased, people who had once been here but were now gone. In the center of the room, an old rotting chair sat empty, and as Tom stood there staring into the abyss of the room, the door slammed shut behind him. He was never leaving.